Welcome, folks. Welcome for another video from yours truly, Milko's Corner. Today we're going to be reacting to another Epic History TV special. This time on Russia, History of Russia, Part One. It's an older series. I think I've watched the first three episodes a while ago, like a really while ago. I remember the overview, the outlines of what's going on, but I don't really have that much of a good memory on this. But I remember it was very well done, which all of Epic History TV's videos are very well done. Anyways, we're getting off topic. I hope you like this my reaction. At the end of the video, if you still like it, leave a like, subscribe. It helps a lot. It motivates me to do those videos. And yeah, let's watch the history of Russia.
For thousands of years, the lands known today as Russia and Ukraine were inhabited by nomadic tribes and mysterious Bronze Age cultures. The only record they left were their graves. In the great open grasslands of the south, the steppe, they buried their chieftains beneath huge mounds called kurgans.
That's interesting.
The ancient Greek historian Herodotus
it's sort of like the pyramids in Egypt.
Called these people Scythians.
Oh, of course, yeah, I know about those.
Their lands were overrun by the same nomadic warriors who brought down the Roman Empire.
Yeah,
the land was then settled by Slavs. They shared some language and culture, but were divided into many different tribes. Vikings from Scandinavia, known in the east as Varangians, rode up Russia's long rivers on daring raids and trade.
I wonder if that's where the Varangian Guard's name comes from, because it was a guard for the Byzantine emperors.
Expeditions. According to
actually, funny history, in which the Varangian Guard was basically the if you've watched Game of Thrones, oh my God, what's the name? The King's Guard, basically, except it wasn't 7 people, it was hundreds, in which actually Hardrada served, the contestant for the English throne in 1066. Yeah, he served on the Varangian Guard of the Byzantine Empire.
Legend, the East Slavs asked a Varangian chief named Rurik to be their prince and unite the tribes. He accepted and made his capital at Novgorod.
Yeah.
His dynasty, the Rurikids, would rule Russia for 700 years. His people called themselves the Rus and gave their name to the land.
Yeah.
Ruriks.
I know a lot of the names because I've played Crusader Kings 3 and European Eurostars, so I know the names, I know where they're situated in terms of geography.
Successor Oleg captured Kiev, making it the capital of a new state, Kievan Rus.
Yeah.
A century later, seeking closer ties with the Byzantine Empire to the south, Vladimir the Great adopted their religion and converted to Orthodox Christianity. He is still venerated today as the man who brought Christianity to Ukraine and Russia.
That's good.
Yaroslav the Wise codified laws and conquered new lands. His reign marked the golden age of Kievan Rus. It was amongst the most sophisticated and powerful states in Europe.
Okay.
But after Yaroslav's death, his sons fought amongst themselves. Kievan Rus disintegrated into a patchwork of feuding princedoms.
Yeah.
Just as a deadly new threat emerged from the east.
The Mongols, here they come!
The Mongols under Genghis Khan had overrun much of Asia. Now they launched a great raid across the Caucasus Mountains and defeated the Kievan princes at the Battle of the Kalka River, but then withdrew.
I wonder why they withdrew.
14 years later, the Mongols returned.
They came
back. A gigantic army led by Batu Khan overran the land. Cities that resisted were burned, their people slaughtered. The city of Novgorod was spared because it submitted.
I wonder why the Mongols never got into Europe. I mean, they must have known it was a very rich area, from traders. They must have heard about it. But I wonder, was it because of their army, or were they? I don't say afraid, but were they, apprehensive about the castles in Europe? I don't know.
To the Mongols. Its prince, Alexander Nevsky, then saved the city again, defeating the Teutonic Knights at the Battle of the Ice, fought above a frozen lake.
No way!
He
Really?
remains one of Russia's most revered heroes. The Mongols ruled the land as conquerors.
The Golden
Their
Horde,
new
yeah.
empire was called the Golden Horde, ruled by a Khan from his new capital at Sarai. The Rus princes were his vassals. They were forced to pay tribute or suffer devastating reprisal raids. They called their oppressors Tatars.
Yeah.
They lived under the Tatar yoke. Alexander Nevsky's son, Daniel, founded the Grand Principality of Moscow, which quickly grew in power. Under the great Uzbek Khan, the Tatars converted to Islam. A rising power, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania defeated the Tatars at the Battle of Blue Waters and conquered Kiev. 18 years later, Dmitry Donskoy, Grand Prince of Moscow, also defeated the Tatars at the Great Battle of Kulikova Field. After years of infighting, the Golden Horde now began to disintegrate into rival khanates.
Like every great empire.
Constantinople, capital and last outpost of the once great Byzantine Empire,
Finally
fell to the Turkish Ottoman Empire.
Yep.
Some hailed Moscow as the Third Rome, the
No
seat
way.
of
I
Orthodox
didn't know
Christian faith. Now Rome and Constantinople had fallen.
Yeah, makes sense.
Meanwhile, the Grand Princes of Moscow continued to expand their power, annexing Novgorod and forging the first Russian state. At the Ugra River, Ivan III of Moscow faced down the Tatar army and forced it to retreat. Russia had finally cast off the Tatar yoke.
1480, okay.
Under Grand Prince Vasily III, Moscow continued to grow in size and power.
28 years, pretty good time, man.
His son, Ivan IV, was crowned the first Tsar of...
Whoa! Ivan the Terrible reigned for 50 years? 51 years, that's insane. That's a huge reign, especially in the 16th century, with the medicine, the hygiene level. I mean...
Russia. He would be
that's
remembered
impressive.
as Ivan the Terrible.
Yeah.
Ivan conquered Tatar lands in Kazan and Astrakhan, but was defeated in the Livonian War by Sweden and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Ivan's modernizing reforms gave way to a reign of terror and mass executions, fueled by his violent paranoia.
So he's basically the Stalin of the 16th
Russia
century.
was still vulnerable. Raiders from the Crimean Khanate were able to burn Moscow itself. But the next year, Russian...
They burned Moscow in 1570, and then Moscow will be burned 300 years later as well by, the Russians.
forces routed the Tatars at
Or 200
Molody,
years.
just south of the city. Cossacks now lived on the open steppe, a lawless region between three warring states. They were skilled horsemen who lived freely and were often recruited by Russia and Poland to fight as mercenaries. Ivan the Terrible's own son...
Are the Cossacks basically ancestors of the Mongols? Because, the Mongols are known for being great horsemen. Is that where their tradition comes from?
The Tsarevich fell victim to one of his father's violent rages,
Dude, killed
bludgeoned
his
to
son?
death with the royal scepter.
Jesus Christ.
The Cossack adventurer Yermak Timofeyevich led the Russian conquest of Siberia, defeating Tatars and subjugating indigenous tribes. In the north, Arkhangelsk was founded, for the time being Russia's only seaport linking it to Western Europe,
It's insane
though
that
it was icebound in
Russia
winter.
was able to conquer
Ivan the
Siberia
Terrible was
with...
succeeded by his son, Fyodor I, who died childless. It was the end of the Rurikid dynasty.
Hmm.
Ivan's advisor, Boris Godunov, became Tsar. But after his sudden death, his widow and teenage son were brutally murdered, and the throne seized by an impostor claiming to be Ivan the Terrible's son. He too was soon murdered.
Jesus.
Russia slid into anarchy, the so-called Time of Troubles. Rebels and foreign armies laid waste to the land, and the population was decimated by famine and plague. Polish troops occupied Moscow. Swedish troops seized Novgorod. The Russian state seemed on the verge of extinction.
What happened? To be continued audio. This was a great video. It was a really good. It sort of refreshed my memory on the way Russia was created, and it was very interesting. But you know what's interesting to me is when you see Russia at its greatest extent before the First World War. That's when it was the Russian Empire. You know, it encompassed everything. All, you know, the Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, all those stans were under Russia. Finland, all the Baltic states, Ukraine, Poland. I mean, it was a huge state. And after the First World War collapses, the Second World War, the Soviet Union expands to the same, pretty much the same borders of the Russian Empire, except, of course, now it's not one Russia. There's multiple republics, and Finland isn't part of the Russian Empire, or of the Soviet Union, sorry. And now Russia is what? Russia has lost so much territory. And Russia had so much potential at the beginning of the 20th century. So much potential. The biggest military, the biggest population. And if it was able to industrialize, even the Germans were afraid that by 1916 they couldn't defeat the Russians because they would have industrialized. They would be so much stronger than they were. And so that's why the war happened, in major parts. Basically out of fear. The war happened because the English were afraid that the Germans would have because the Germans were growing their navy. And Wilhelm II had this dream of a bigger navy. The Russians were afraid that, what were they afraid of? The French, let me rephrase this. The Austro-Hungarians were afraid to give up power to other people that were not Austrians in their empire. The French, everybody was afraid of Germany growing. Germany was afraid of Russia growing, and Russia needed a war because they just lost the Sino-Japanese war against Japan, 1905, 1906. Around there, they lost this humiliating war against Japan. The biggest empire, humiliated. They needed the win. They needed the war. The Germans needed a war to establish themselves finally as the greatest power in Europe. France needed a war to reclaim lost territory. So many countries, Italy needed a war because they wanted territory from the Austro-Hungarians. Everybody wanted a war in the First World War, which is interesting because the Second World War is a bit different. It's more complex. Anyways, we're getting off topic here. If you like my video, subscribe. It means a lot. And I'll see you guys next time. See ya.